The window's witness characters, Margaret Chun, 30, to a warm-hearted marketing coordinator with hopeful eyes and a trusting nature, David Chun, 35, Margaret's husband of 3 years, a real estate attorney with charm that hides secrets, Rosa Martinez, 76, an elegant elderly woman with silver hair, kind eyes, and a survivor's wisdom. The restaurant glowed with amber light that evening in autumn. Margaret had chosen this place carefully. The Italian bistro on 5th Street, where she and David had shared their third date 7 years ago. She remembered how he'd held her hand across the table that night, promising her the world. Tonight was their anniversary. 3 years of marriage. 7 years together. Margaret smoothed her emerald dress and watched the entrance. David was running late, but she didn't mind. She understood. His law firm kept him busy. She'd learned patience in their marriage, learned to appreciate the moments they carved out from his demanding schedule. When David finally arrived, he kissed her cheek quickly. His cologne smelled different, sharper, she noticed, but said nothing. She'd learned not to question small things. They ordered wine. David kept glancing at his phone. Everything all right? Margaret asked gently. Just work, he said, flashing that smile she'd fallen in love with. Big client. You know how it is. She did know, or she thought she did. They were halfway through their entrees when David's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and something shifted in his expression, something Margaret couldn't quite name. I am so sorry, he said, already standing. Emergency. I have to take this outside. Margaret watched him walk away, phone pressed to his ear. Through the window, she could see him pacing on the sidewalk. His free hand gestured sharply. This didn't look like a work call. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Margaret sat alone at their anniversary dinner, fork resting on her plate. The couple beside her laughed at something. The sound felt distant. At the neighboring table sat an elderly woman dining alone. She had silver hair swept into an elegant bun, and she wore a burgundy jacket with pearl buttons. Margaret noticed her because the woman was watching her with eyes that seemed to understand everything. 15 minutes. Margaret felt the familiar ache building in her chest, the one she'd been ignoring for months. The late nights, the unexplained absences, the way David sometimes looked through her instead of at her. When 20 minutes had passed, the elderly woman leaned slightly toward Margaret's table. My dear, she said softly. Her voice carried the gentle authority of someone who'd lived fully. I don't mean to intrude, but I've been where you are. Margaret looked at her, surprised by the directness, yet somehow comforted by it. I'm Rosa, the woman continued, and I can see what you're trying not to see. Margaret's eyes welled. She blinked rapidly, trying to maintain composure. Rosa reached into her purse and pulled out several bills. She folded them carefully and extended her hand toward Margaret. Their fingers touched as the money passed between them. Rosa leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. Call a taxi, she said. The bathroom window opens. It faces the alley. Climb out. Don't look back tonight. Tomorrow, when you're ready. Then you look. Then you decide. But tonight, protect your heart. Margaret stared at the money in her hand. $40. An escape route from an old woman who understood. How did you know? Margaret whispered. Rose's smile was sad and knowing. Because 30 years ago, I sat where you're sitting, and I stayed. And it cost me 10 more years of my life before I found the courage to leave. Don't make my mistake, sweetheart. Margaret glanced toward the window. David was still outside, animated, his back to the restaurant. But maybe I'm wrong, Margaret said weakly. Maybe it really is work. Maybe, Rosa said gently. But your instincts brought me to speak to you. Trust them, at least for tonight. Trust them. Margaret stood on shaking legs. She picked up her purse. The bathroom was toward the back of the restaurant. She'd noticed the small window there when she'd freshened up earlier. Thank you, she whispered to Rosa. Be brave, Rosa replied. You're stronger than you know. Margaret walked to the bathroom, her heart pounding. Inside the small space, she locked the door and approached the window. It was narrow but manageable. She pushed it open, letting in the cool October air. The alley below was about a 6-foot drop. Margaret removed her heels, tied them together, and hung them around her neck. She hiked up her dress, climbed onto the toilet, and squeezed through the window. For a moment, she hung there, suspended between her old life and whatever came next. Then she dropped into the alley, landing in her stockinged feet on cold pavement. She pulled out her phone and called a taxi, giving them the alley address behind the restaurant. While she waited, she put her shoes back on, hands trembling. The taxi arrived within minutes. Margaret climbed in and gave her best friend Jennifer's address. As they pulled away, she saw David through the restaurant window, walking back inside. He looked annoyed. He didn't look worried. That told her everything. Jennifer opened her door in pajamas, took one look at Margaret's face, and pulled her into a hug. Tell me, Jennifer said. Margaret told her everything. The long absences, the phone calls, the anniversary dinner. Interrupted. The kind stranger who'd given her an escape route. What do I do? Margaret asked. Tomorrow, Jennifer said. Tomorrow you find the truth. Tonight you rest. But Margaret couldn't rest. At midnight, she borrowed Jennifer's laptop and opened David's cloud account. They'd shared passwords once. In the early days of trust, the photos loaded slowly, each one a small death. David with a woman Margaret didn't know. On vacation Margaret hadn't been invited to. At restaurants during late work nights, messages talking about their future together. Plans that didn't include Margaret. 6 months. This had been going on for 6 months. Margaret sat in the blue glow of the laptop screen and felt something shift inside her. Not just heartbreak, something harder, something clearer. The next morning, she called a lawyer. Not from David's firm. Someone Jennifer recommended. Someone tough. She went home while David was at work and packed systematically important documents. Photographs from her life before David. Jewelry her grandmother had given her. Her grandmother's recipe box. Things that were hers. She took nothing they'd bought together. She didn't want pieces of a lie. She left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter with a single note. I know. 2 days later, David called. 57 times. Margaret didn't answer. Her lawyer handled everything. 3 weeks later, Margaret got a call from an unknown number. Hello, dear. This is Rosa. From the restaurant. Margaret was stunned. How did you get my number? Your friend Jennifer, Rosa said. I came back to the restaurant, hoping to find you, to make sure you were all right. The manager remembered you. Jennifer's phone number was on the reservation. I hope you don't mind that I was persistent. No, Margaret said softly. I don't mind. I wanted to know that you're safe, Rosa said. I am. Thanks to you. You saved me from a worse discovery, a bigger humiliation. I only gave you $40, Rosa said. You saved yourself. They talked for an hour that first time. Rosa shared her story. An unfaithful husband, 10 years of denial, the children she'd stayed for, the life she'd rebuilt after finally leaving at 45. I'm 76 now, Rosa said, and these last 30 years, living authentically, have been worth more than those last years ever were. Rosa and Margaret began meeting for coffee every Sunday. Rosa became the grandmother figure Margaret had lost. Margaret became the daughter of Rosa's own children, busy with their lives, rarely called. David tried to come back. Flowers, apologies, promises of counseling. Margaret stayed firm. Some betrayals run too deep. 4 months after that night at the restaurant, Margaret's divorce was final. 6 months after, she accepted a promotion that required relocating to Seattle. A fresh start on her last Sunday in town. Rosa and Margaret sat in their favorite coffee shop, sunlight streaming through the windows. I'm going to miss you, Margaret said. Tears forming. I'll miss you too, sweetheart, Rosa replied. But you're going to thrive out there. You're going to discover who you are without someone diminishing your light. You changed my life, Margaret said. That $40, that whispered advice. You were an angel that night. Rosa shook her head. No angel. Just a woman who saw herself in you and hoped to save you some pain. She paused. Though I must confess, there was something else too. What do you mean? Rosa's expression turned complex, mixing satisfaction with old pain. Your husband, David, 30 years ago. His father was the man who broke my heart. Same name, same law firm, same pattern. When I saw David that night, I recognized him immediately. I'd seen photos over the years through mutual acquaintances. Margaret stared. You knew who he was? I did. And when I saw him do to you what his father did to me, leaving you alone on your anniversary, something in me said not again. Not to another young woman. Not if I could prevent it. So helping me was also revenge. Rosa smiled softly. Perhaps. But revenge transformed into protection, into breaking a cycle. David's father destroyed years of my life. I couldn't stop that. But I could stop his son from doing the same to you. Is that wrong? Margaret reached across the table and squeezed Rosa's hand. It's human, and it's love. You turned your pain into someone else's salvation. We carry our wounds, Rosa said, but we don't have to pass them on. We can use them to light someone else's way instead. When they parted that afternoon, they promised to stay in touch. Phone calls, video chats, Visits when possible. In Seattle, Margaret rebuilt her life piece by piece. A new apartment with a view of the water, deeper friendships, work that challenged her, therapy that helped her understand her patterns, her worth. A year later, she met someone new, someone kind and present and honest. She took things slowly this time, listening to her instincts, and on the anniversary of that dinner that escaped through the bathroom window, Margaret called Rosa. "I wanted to thank you again," Margaret said, "for seeing me, for trusting me with the truth, for giving me an exit route when I didn't know I needed one, and I want to thank you," Rosa replied, "for reminding me that painful experiences can become gifts when we share them with open hearts. You've given these last years of my life beautiful meaning." They talked until the sunset. Two women connected by one moment of brave kindness, by the complicated mix of love and revenge and protection and wisdom that makes us human. Margaret had learned that sometimes betrayal opens doors we were afraid to walk through ourselves, that sometimes the end of one story is the beginning of a better one, that strangers can become family when they see us clearly, and she learned that $40 and a whispered warning can change everything if you're brave enough to climb through the window.